Welcome back, everybody. Joe Everest, the fence expert. If you've been following along with this wood cleaning series, you know what we're getting ready to do. If not, a short recap. We've been cleaning this fence using Stainless Steel Expert's line of wood cleaner, wood stripper, both followed up with a wood brightener to see how clean we can get this fence. Now, this is not a paid promotion. We're not getting paid to make this video. But to be clear, Stainless Steel Experts did send us the chemicals for free. So, take that for what it's worth. Like I said, we used a wood cleaner and wood brightener on these boards. We used a wood stripper and wood brightener on these boards. The wood stripper seemed to work a little bit better than the wood cleaner. I think just because there was such an intense amount of algae and just organic growth on the boards. When we rinse them with a garden hose because that's typically what you guys are going to have at home available readily to clean your fence. But if we were paid to clean this fence, we would bring out a power washer. Now, we're not looking for the pressure so much as we are the water volume. The water pressure or the water volume coming out of a residential faucet is typically 3 to 4 gallons a minute. It could be as low as 1 or 2 gallons a minute depending on well water versus city water. Anyway, we're going to bring out a power washer, wash this fence with 8.5 gallons a minute. We're going to put a lot of water on this fence to try to clean it just a little bit more. If you've been following along with the series, you know what step comes first. We're going to get this fence wet. All right, guys, let's talk about orifice size for just a second because I think it's important to talk about here. This tip is what would typically come on a power washer. It's a green tip, it's 25 degree. Now, both of these tips are also 25 degree. That's simply talking about the fan size coming out of the nozzle. If you guys notice, the orifice size here is significantly smaller than either of these. So when the orifice size is smaller, you actually get incredibly more pressure. You get a lot of pressure coming out of this nozzle as compared with these two nozzles. So that's why I say when you're using a power washer, use the largest orifice size possible. So in a standard pressure washer kit, that would probably be the soap nozzle. Just the hole in the nozzle is going to be significantly larger. We're not looking for a lot of pressure. If we were to use this head as opposed to one of these heads, this could possibly do more damage than one of these would. One of these is going to be a gentle wash, but it's a significant amount of volume. We're throwing as much water at this fence as we can. So, like I said, if you remember nothing else, the larger the hole, the softer the spray, and the less damage you could possibly do to the fence. So again, guys, we're not using a ton of pressure. It's basically a little bit more volume than what you would get out of your regular hose at your house. We're not looking for pressure, we're looking for volume. So again, the reason we're pre-rinsing the boards is so it keeps all of our cleaner near the surface. As long as it's on the first few outer layers, that's really where all of the organic growth is going to reside. It needs sunlight to grow, so it's going to stay on the outer layer. It also makes sure the cleaner doesn't get trapped inside the board when we rinse it. When we neutralize it, then rinse it. So I think this fence is pretty well wet. Now we're going to get to mixing the chemicals. All right, so once again, we're going to be using the Stainless Steel Experts wood stripper because there's an incredible amount of organic growth here, and then followed up with the wood brightener. The wood brightener is going to neutralize the cleaner, but it's also going to bring out as much of the natural beauty as we can get out of that board. Now, this fence doesn't have rust streaks from the nails, but if it did, the oxalic acid would also go ahead and neutralize those. So wood brightener is a multi-purpose tool, if you will. Now, each one of these is pre-packaged, 1 package per gallon. We've got 2 pump-up sprayers here, each with 2 gallons of water in it. So we know we need 2 packs of cleaner and 2 packs of wood brightener per container. Now, after we get the chemicals in the pump-up sprayers, we need to make sure they're mixed really well. That way we're sure that we're getting all the cleaning effectiveness out of each of the chemicals. So we've got just a standard battery-powered drill here and a paint mixer from, again, the local home improvement stores. This came from the paint sections. Typically used to mix up paint, but today we're going to use it to mix up chemicals. Now, as we've talked about in previous videos, I like that each of the different chemicals is color-coded. That way we know at a glance what chemical we're dealing with, whether it's the eco cleaner, whether it's the wood cleaner, or whether it's the wood stripper. They're each different colors so that I know at a glance exactly what's in this sprayer. Now, if you've not worked with chemicals before, you're just really not used to working with them, I would probably suggest some protective equipment. Some gloves would be a good idea. Maybe some eye covering, maybe some goggles. That way, if it maybe splash up into your eyes, you wouldn't get a chemical burn. All right, so the rest of the process, or the next step in the process, is we're going to apply the wood stripper, then we'll rinse it again, we'll apply the wood brightener, rinse it for a final time. Let's put the wood stripper on the fence and see how it does. Now, as we've talked about in other videos, I'm starting at the bottom and working my way to the top. That way the chemical that reaches the board first is going to be new cleaner, so it's not cleaner that's been diluted with whatever's coming off the board. If we were to start at the top and work our way down, likely you'd be getting some diluted cleaner at the bottom. So for washing, we start at the bottom and work our way up. For rinsing, we start at the top and work our way down because we're trying to get all of that contaminant off the board for cleaning, or for rinsing rather. All right, so we've got one good application of the cleaner up on the boards. It's already looks like it's doing some work. We'll kind of give it a little bit of scrape test here, and we see that it's already coming off pretty easily. We're going to go ahead and apply this again. The algae growth is pretty thick, so we want to get as much cleaning chemical on the board as possible. We'll give it 2, maybe 3 applications depending on how easily this algae growth starts coming off the board. All right, so now we've got the cleaner applied to the wood. Now all we do is wait. So we're going to let this dwell for about 10 minutes, come back and give it a rinse. All right guys, we're going to give this a rinse before we put the cleaner on it. We're going to try to get as much of this organic growth off as possible before putting the brightener on it. Now again, we're using the power washer for volume, not pressure. Not a lot of pressure here, guys. So one thing to note here too, since we're using more pressure than your standard faucet, we need to talk about how we're washing this and what direction are we washing it. We're going to be washing this top to bottom, then bottom to top, always following the wood grain, so that if there is a little bit of streaking because you're using a little bit more pressure, you know, if these boards are really soft, it would follow the wood grain and be a little bit less noticeable. If you're going against the wood grain, that would start to become very noticeable. So when you're using pressure, anything above a standard water faucet at your house, you want to follow the wood grain. Now that's applicable whether we're talking about fences, decks, really any wood in general that we're washing. Now while the camera is off, I was demonstrating to Jeremy what would happen when the green tip was on the power washer and used on a board. I guess forgetting that this is for a YouTube channel and we should have been recording that. So, take 2, we're going to clean this board with just a standard 25-degree green tip that you would see on a pressure washer. And I think you'll see for yourself why this is a bad idea. It got the board quite a bit cleaner, but as you can see, and Jeremy will show you close-ups here in a minute, you can see everywhere that it started and stopped, even using vertical motions following the grain, you're still going to have, even using sweeping motions, you're going to have these start and stop lines. It's just not a great look. So granted, it could come a little bit cleaner using the power washer tips, but overall it's going to be a worse experience. I think when we brighten this and rinse it again, I think that's going to become even more evident. And now we apply the wood brightener, the oxalic acid. All right, so we've got our wood brightener applied. Like every other application, we're going to give it 10 minutes to really dwell, and then we'll rinse it back off again. All right, now for the final rinse. All right, guys, so we've got the fence clean. Now we need to give it a few days, let it dry out to really get a good look at it and determine what we think about it. So, we'll be right back. All right, guys, well, through the magic of YouTube editing, once again, here we are, several days later. I say several days because we went through a tremendous amount of rainstorms here in southwest Missouri. We gave it a little bit extra time to dry out, but I think the results speak for themselves. So just to recap, on my left, your right, we had the wood stripper, but with just a hose fitting, right, the hose handle, very light pressure, lower volume here. It did okay. If we're using a really dark stain, I think that covers a lot of this up. I think that would be acceptable. But if we're looking for using a lighter stain, or we're really concerned about getting everything off this board, I think the power washer is probably the way to go. Let me remind you, on the pressure washer, use a really low pressure, high volume tip. Typically the orifice size is larger, the spray pattern is wider. If you're just using the default tips that come with the power washer, use the soap nozzle. It's wide, it's really open, not a lot of pressure, but a ton of volume. Obviously, these boards are looking really nice, except for the vines and associated other nonsense growing through them. This fence will eventually get torn down and replaced. But if we're purely looking at the boards, I think these turned out super nice. So again, I think the best process, if you've got wood that has a ton of organic growth that's really stubborn, would be the Stand Steel Experts stripper, the wood stripper, combined with the oxalic acid, the wood brightener, and followed up with a power washer with a very low pressure, very high volume tip, which is exactly the boards we see here. All in all, I think it's a great result. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But until next time, I'm Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors.